Kimura is a submission, okay, and we're going to talk a lot about how to make sure that you can get the submission, the Kimura, what is required for you to get it, and what do you want to be looking for to go, you know what, I made it to this point, this is going to be a submission every single time. 100% of the time we get to this stage, submission. But even more than its power as a submission is Kimura is sort of this gateway that allows you to go from wherever you are to somewhere that's much better in any scenario in jiu-jitsu, with the two exceptions being I'm on top of you in your closed guard and the bottom and the top of the mount. Now that's a pretty good ratio overall, because if I say top and bottom of the mount, does that mean that if I'm underneath the side control, Kimura is a good idea? Absolutely, great idea. If I have something on my back, yes, Kimura can get you out of there and put you back into a winning position. So there's not really anything else in the sport that has this quality where if I get a grip called a Kimura from any position, there's a way for me to take it to an advantageous position for me, potentially a submission, and failing that, another form of submission, or potentially a back take. Okay? So what do we want to do here? We want to get a sense of what is the minimum requirement for me to attack safely as I can, a Kimura on you. What's the minimum requirement for me to get a Kimura on you? And what would that mean when I get that Kimura? What should that look like? What's my grip? Where should my body position be? What should I expect immediately to happen from you? Once I've got the Kimura, I've recognized the moment and I've locked it up, what should I do with it? And when does it become a submission, and when does it become something else? And if you get that, the sort of mechanics of a Kimura itself, then we can go very broad, very quickly, and talk about applications of Kimuras. From standing position, kneeling position, as a way to get out of turtle, as a way to counter a single leg. There's endless ways to apply Kimura once you have a sense of the mechanics of it. When you put somebody into a Kimura and you do it properly, it's an intimidating lock. It is not something people should be sitting underneath going, yeah, maybe I'll get this Kimura, I don't know if it'll work though. A good Kimura, it feels like your arm is certainly going to explode. And that if you don't tap, you're right on the cusp of just elbow explosion all over the mat. We don't want to have that happen, so we tap. Now that only happens when you can keep somebody where they are while you turn the volume up on the submission. The more a Kimura is a shoulder submission, the more the submission's lock has been compromised in some way. Because the more play there is on the arm, the more that movement will be in the shoulder, and so the discomfort and pain comes from them moving their own shoulder in resistance to what you're doing. It's as if you were trying to climb a rope, and every once in a while I just like hit in a small knife inside of the rope, and you're climbing and your hands are bleeding, and you're like, what? It's like that was not just rope qualities, that was a knife in there, and so you cut your hand. Same with Kimura. It's not a shoulder lock per se, but as you move around in the stress of the actual lock, you're going to feel a little bit here. Okay? But the goal of a Kimura, the reason you twist it, is to take the two bones of the forearm and to dislocate them from the humerus. You do that by twisting them off. Okay? So shoulder is a byproduct of twisting stuff going on down here, but there's too much slack in the humerus, so that force is then put into the shoulder and doesn't pan out so well. We want to avoid shoulder locks. They're hard to recover from, and they're not really that efficient. We want elbow locks that can enable us to go into other elbow locks and are a twisting force that make it feel like the radius and ulna are just going to switch places on the bone, but they'll just dislocate. So let's start off with a north-south Kimura. So Allison will lie down and have her head here, and legs out to the side here. Now the reason we start here is because in a Kimura position, what tends to happen is one elbow has become slightly raised in comparison to another elbow, okay? And in our efforts to go for Kimura, we generally want an elbow that's sharply bent and sticking up tall out of the floor like this. So this would be an ideal circumstance to start building the grip of a Kimura. Okay, and you can already tell what would happen if I came in to start attacking Allison's arm and she knew about Kimura. One of the first things we might run into is that she dropped this elbow, and now I need to know that there's a new top elbow. Okay, so we've already got this problem in front of us where we want Kimura, but we may have to switch sides as we do it. Okay? So, in a Kimura, there's a frame arm, okay? Frame arm or pull arm. The frame arm comes in and it's always your same arm as the one you're attacking. So my frame arm is my left against Allison's left. What I'm trying to do when I put my frame arm in place is to surround the joints of Allison's elbow while using the back of my hand to create tension on the lower half of her arm, and my elbow and armpit to create tension on the upper half of her arm. So we come in, we put in an armpit and elbow close to their elbow. We put the back of the hand to create tension in the arm, and you'll see my right elbow naturally starts to move her upper arm forward. Okay? So we come in and we're just like this. We would want to avoid something like this, and we would want to avoid this, so that my wrist is bent back right here. Now the Kimura grip. Ideally, you want to grab the thinnest part of your partner's wrist with the widest part of your grip. That's always your middle finger and thumb. So it's half hand, half wrist. That's the grip. Not just hand, definitely not just wrist. We go half on the hand, half on the wrist. My frame arm comes through, and I will also go over my own wrist with my middle finger. I recommend at first, do not use your thumb on this. The key here, I'll lift this up just a hair bit, is when we come into Kimura, all of our wrists should be flush. So there's no daylight poking out between my hands and Allison's wrist. This, much less effective. This, much less effective, because you can see that daylight peeking through. Okay, so I grab, I re-grab, and I close out the daylight between our wrists with a forward throttle, like this. Okay? If I've done this correctly, and I start to stand up on my partner, it's pretty easy to get Allison to actually come up off the floor with me. Okay? And I call this the Kimura test, where the stress on her arm makes it so that she's motivated to use her other arm to get out. Okay, so here's the first drill we do. I'm going to come in, and I'm going to lock up a frame arm. I go elbow to elbow, armpit to elbow, back of hand to wrist. I now find her wrist, and I lock up. I get used to the notion of taking all the daylight between our wrists. A forward throttle, and a nice easy stand-up, giving my partner plenty of time to come up, gives us an ability to come all the way up, come all the way up off the ground. And this is our first example of Kimura as restraint. Let's look at how do you actually finish a Kimura under ideal circumstances. Okay? There's a whole bunch of different kinds of Kimura, up to, you could say, 8, 9 kinds of Kimura. We're going to focus on one with 3, maybe 4 add-ons to it. But the big one, the one we got to walk out of here with one Kimura by the end of this camp, is the side Kimura. Okay? We have side control, Kimura finishing position. So now, when we come into this Kimura, what we're going to do is we're going to go extreme like we were going to do the Kimura test, the one where we lifted our partner up. So when I come in with my frame arm, I'm going to draw it all in close to me here, so that you can see tension running through the arm right from the start, okay? Instead of just here. Now I draw that all in, I make my grip, and I make my second grip. From here, I'm going to throttle forward with both of my knuckles, so that I'm not just gripping, but I grip, and I throttle my hands forward. Okay? When I do that, if I have Marcus's hand behind his back here, he starts to begin to feel the stress of the lock. If I unthrottle my hands, better?
Yeah.
Not so uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
So we want to pull elbow to our own armpit, so that my elbow, his elbow, my armpit, surrounding it here. I take my grip, I take out all the daylight, and I do a forward throttle. Now I scrape his hand to his scapula. I bring my knee up and my knee down. My left knee now comes up. Now when I go over the top, I want to scrape my way into this position here. In contrast to this, watch my right elbow. Do you see how it lands at a slight distance from his hip? I want it to be up against his body, bringing him towards me. Okay? The reason for this is when I beat his shoulder now with my knee, and I take that big step forward with my left leg, I hide his hand under his back. We were here, where the hand's visible. step, pelvis goes forward, hand is gone. Now since this hand isn't coming out of here, I can move my left elbow into an ideal finishing position. That's going to be elbow to elbow as much as possible. Now my left elbow and my head move together into the corner. Okay? And if I do this, I'm going to get a good strong finishing lock. Now the way you test it, you get to here and you remove that leg from the head. When I pull, Marcus's head starts to come up to relieve the stress of the lock. We do this a couple times, and then I step back over his head and I purposefully plant him back down to the ground so his head does not come up on this last one when we get the submission. I don't want to see arms in the air doing this for the submission. Now this is my strength and flailing and insanity versus your aggression and ability to make me tap while I'm like this. Put them in a position where they are not going to get out, and then you can, on your own schedule, make them tap. Okay? So the hand behind the back and then down. Okay? This is why Kimura is often thought of as a strength move. Because like this, it is a strength move. There's too much movement around for you to have control over somebody to keep them safe and submit them. If you put their hand like this, you flatten them out, and they are not going anywhere. You can pull on their elbow, and you can do it over the course of 3 minutes, and then they'll tap. Okay, so it starts off, we're here, north-south Kimura, we see a sharply bent arm. Frame arm goes in first, that means back of hand, elbow, and armpit, all around Jonathan's elbow. Now I take a grip by the thinnest part of his wrist, and I cover up my own wrist. Now I bring my knee here as a shin pin over his bottom bicep. I take his hand up high, I want his elbow at his shoulder line, I want his knuckles by his scapula. Now my elbow leads the way. Not my head, but my elbow leads the way down to his hip. Once I'm down to his hip, I focus on feeding his near shoulder with my own knee. I make sure that I've stepped in front of my own grip, and then I push my pelvis forward to flatten him out over his hand. My elbow sweeps out to his elbow, and with a very tiny pull, I can get the submission I'm looking for with Kimura, and I can also provide a lot of follow through should it be necessary, but it's probably not going to be. So let's look at Kimura again, and this time we'll take it from the side position. The arm is something like this, but they're flat. And now we need to do something slightly different, because remember, our ideal scenario to start was this: a nice sharply bent elbow, an exposed back that we could just conveniently put the hand on and flatten them out on it. But this is a huge advantage, and we just need to change things a little bit to get them into this same position. So let's say I've got Jonathan here, he's lying down, and I have side control on him. He's got his arm out here, bent 90 degrees, which is nice and flat here. When I come up and I lock a Kimura, here, let's notice a few things. First of all, I've got my frame arm, that's my left against his left. My left elbow wants to be right up next to his. My left armpit would be ideally over his elbow. And my right hand is a stopper. It wants to keep his hand in place for now. I don't want to be pushing it around. Okay? Now a couple things about this. It's possible to work with an arm that's more than 90 degrees, like this. It's possible to work with an arm that's straight. No problem there. My preference and what I think people tend to find a little easier is less than 90 degrees. So kind of a sharp bend in the arm. Okay? This makes it easier to put the hand behind the back once they've raised up. And just anytime things get further away from your head, they become a little harder to control, just as a general rule. So if you can, always take the arm in so that it's a little bit less than 90 degrees in the bend. Always take that elbow up to the shoulder line, okay? And then always aim their knuckles at their scapula, like this, okay? So not this, right? So that's it. We've got our Kimura, I've got my frame arm in, I've got my stopper arm in, and I want to put my right elbow down on the floor, but I need to pick Jonathan up. So what we do is we row the right elbow down while we row the left elbow up and point it at the ceiling here. And this will always pick people up off the mat. Okay? Now what I'm looking to do is when I row him up, if I throttle my hands, his wrist goes behind his elbow. It was in front of his elbow. I throttle, I get it behind the elbow. Once it's behind the elbow, it's super easy to just tuck it under their back. No, it doesn't matter who they are, how much they resist, it's going behind their back. If it's like this, hand is in front of elbow, maybe you get it. But if you throttle and you have them trade position, so now the hand is behind the elbow, easiest thing in the world, put that hand behind the back. Now I push my pelvis forward to flatten out his body. I don't think most of you can see Jonathan's hand now, is that right? That's ideal. I don't want his hand revealed like this. Then there's a lot of play, there's a lot of slack in the joint. So I push my pelvis forward to flatten him out. Now, my armpit is over his hip on one side, and my hip is over his armpit on the other side. So my right armpit here, right over his hip, and my right hip here, right over his armpit. So I'm on a diagonal line here. I step beyond my grip. So my foot is the furthest thing forward here. That lets me move my left elbow into this exact position at the edge of his elbow. The difference between this, where the finish is immediate, and this is huge, huge difference. I take my elbow and my armpit and I move them all the way up to his elbow. Now I just give a small pull and I push with my legs for the nice finishing position. Anytime I'm in this position here and I've got an arm that I'm working for Kimura, one of the best times to use my thumb is here when I do not have my hands locked to each other. A thumb grip is very useful at this point because it lets me deal with him getting close to his own uniform and grabbing onto the cloth. Okay? My thumb is a barrier between his arm and the rest of his body. If I did not have that, I could potentially hold him off, but it's just a matter of time before he slips underneath and he grabs something and now he's got defense. So a thumb grip is very good when your hands are not locked. Okay? It's good in other places, but this is another good one. Okay, so now we've got this arm in front of us and we would like to go in and get a grip on our own arm, pick him up and put him in a Kimura. But there's gonna be times when you go, wait a minute, I'm a bit taller than this guy. Why is it so tough to reach my own wrist over here? Okay. Well, part of the reason is because there's a lot of friction on the ground and you're also trying to pin them at the same time. So if you were to just lift up and make that happen, you feel you're gonna lose all this control down by the hip. So anytime the frame arm is having trouble getting into the right position, but I have the stopper arm in place, we're gonna do a bit of work with unlocked hands. Okay? So what we do is a similar sawing under method that we started with. Then I go elbow to elbow, head over elbow. This is really important because it prevents other lines of escape from my partner. Now, I'm gonna go elbow to elbow, head over elbow, and I point my left elbow up at the ceiling while I turn my hips towards his head. So we set up the legs. One, we point at the ceiling. Two, and then we'll always take his back off the ground. Now I can lock in and get a grip here on my own hand, my middle finger over my wrist. You'll see I've got very, very poor wrist positioning right now. I should be throttling forward, okay? But in situations like this where I'm just now picking him up, what I want to do is pick him up to a degree where his hand and elbow switch places. So now his hand is further towards his head than his elbow. Here, that's not necessarily true. The elbow goes up, the hand gets brought in. Now when I go to lock, they're about to trade places. Okay, so this is when I will throttle my hands and put his hand in behind his back. Okay, this is super important. Does everyone see how right now Jonathan's hand, I would say, is in front of his elbow? Clear, right? Mm-hmm. I want to get to the point where his hand is behind his elbow. As soon as this happens, I don't care who he is, gets a lot weaker, and it's much easier to manipulate the arm. Now we go through, we lock a figure four grip. My left wrist is bent back right now, my right wrist is bent back. I'm going to take both of them and throttle them forward. So we've got our initial grip, we go in, I make contact with my hand, and now I take out all the daylight by throttling one and throttling two. Now I use my pelvis to flatten out his upper body so that his hand is covered by his own torso. I step forward with my left leg and I sweep my elbow out towards his elbow. When it's time to finish, my head will straighten, my spine will straighten towards the corner. As I do this, I want to interrupt his head rising so that as my head moves and my elbow pulls, my left leg goes towards his head so that I stop him before he even gets started with his movement. Okay? So from a side control position, side Kimura, we've gotten the ability to get a grip on the hand here using the thumb because my hands are not locked. But I'm having trouble getting his back off the ground and completing the figure four and getting into a finish. So no problem, we're just gonna saw under and we're gonna work with unlocked hands. I just need to get his elbow pointing up at the ceiling. So I turn my legs into a right-sided hip position. I'm already building up that outside step. I use a pickup, elbow goes to the ceiling until I get him into the position that I can lock my two hands together. Once the hands lock, we go further until the hand and elbow switch places. Once they switch places, it's pretty easy to just tuck that hand under the back. Once it's tucked under, I want to flatten him back out over it. So I lock the door and then we throw away the key by just planting them over their own hand. Now I go forward, elbow and armpit over his elbow. Really big difference between that and this, where I'm still hanging back on this one here. We go forward here. Now my left leg provides the drive so that I can pull my head and elbow into the corner, okay? And when you look at almost anyone who's been photographed doing Kimura, who's like a great master at Kimura, they almost always use this as the moment to have their photo taken. And it's not just because it's great for photos, this is a great position for finishing, where I'm extending my whole body, using my whole body to pin and pull on this Kimura lock. So we're not finishing like this, but we open up and get tall. And then we keep their head down and that elbow pull for the finish. We're going to talk first about some setups that you might be interested in. Okay? Now, when it comes time to get to a Kimura, you can usually go after the top elbow. That's the one you should spend most of your focus on. And you're thinking about, how am I going to get this elbow into a position where I can get a frame arm through and a stopper arm in place that lets me put his hand behind his back. Okay, so there's three main ways you can go about doing this. From a position like this, where I have a top elbow in front of me, I would like to go from more of a north-south type of a start. Now, what I want to do is get my hand in here so that it comes around and I get this frame. But it's not going to be really easy to do that. He's probably going to start dropping down slightly here as he feels the thread develop on one side. So what we do is we bring our elbow forward right next to his. Okay, I take my hand and I put it towards his elbow, and I'm just going to saw my hand underneath his elbow like this, and then turn my hand palm up. Okay? So I was in close. One elbow's a little bit higher. I'm going to go after this arm, but it's hard to do that just with my thumb by itself. So I move my elbow forward, and I take my thumb and wrist, and I put it on his stomach here. Once it's on his stomach, I start sawing it up and through. Now I turn my left hand over inside of his arm, and look what we've got. We've got that frame arm. Okay? Once you've got the frame arm, you've got the Kimura. It's just a matter of formalizing it and really getting into the grip. So I'm going to use this frame arm to turn him up on his side. Okay? This is going to be one of the places where we start transitioning into the other forms of attack, where I might go behind his head, walk behind him, start a drive to his opposite elbow, and then come in ear to ear, and we're back into a class from about 2.5 weeks ago, taking the back with the cross grip. Okay. But finishing side Kimura, we were able to get the frame arm. Now, the next thing I want to do is decide what I'm going to do about this hand. Okay. This is a great position for me because all I need to do is put a hand on the floor on the line of his shoulders, bring my own knee through, and use a shin pin right here to start separating his hands. Once I get the shin pin in place, we lock the Kimura. We bring everything up and close, up and away, and then elbow to that shoulder line, knuckles to the scapula. We lead at the elbow, bring everything down with control, and now I'm going to switch over so I can beat his shoulder, flatten him out over his own hand, sweep out elbow to elbow, and we get a nice pulling finish. Okay. Lock hands. Another way to work from here, if I can't just do
it with my knee is I send my hand through and I get a hold of his opposite leg. And I just use this to hold an opening so that my knee can go all the way through, and we find ourselves in that same position as the previous movement. So now I'm just gonna lever with my right hand to break his grip, and I'll clear his hand all the way behind his back before I throttle my wrist and start putting him into that finishing position. Okay, so we've got locked hands, and then locked hands, we usually just start with a knee. If that's too narrow, we go with a hand that opens the door for the knee. And then what starts to happen is we've got locked hands that start separating and going hand inside the thigh, like this. Okay? Now, the problem here is that, yes, he's got his hand stopped at the Kimura using his legs, but the real problem is that he's now straightened his arm as well. So instead of trying to finish the Kimura just like I did before, I'm gonna come in, I'm still gonna use my knee over his legs, and this time I'm gonna take my hand with my thumb pointing up, and I'm gonna go in and pluck his hand off of his uniform here, going in this direction here. So I don't go with the standard Kimura grip, but I go palm facing away, I grab at the thumb and all four knuckles, and we peel and pluck. The frame arm goes in, and now I lift it up above the range of a grip, so I can lock over his wrist, lock over my own wrist, elbow to shoulder line, knuckles to scapula, and we fold everything over for the finish. You'll see I'm going tall, tall, tall here. This is not a problem. We flatten out the hip, and we go into the finish. So from a type of side control, almost a north-south, we know there's a top elbow, there's a bottom elbow. For the first round, let's always put that left elbow as the uppermost elbow, since it will keep us on the same side. Okay? Now, I want to get my hand and thumb to go through as a frame arm like this, but that's not always so easy. So we bring the elbow forward, and we go with the thinner parts of our wrist inside, and we just look to put a hand on the stomach. Once the hand's on the stomach, I can just saw my way up into his arm. I use the back of my hand against his wrist so that my frame arm is putting tension through the lock. Now I look at what's going on over here. Okay, there's a little bit of an opening. Oh, there goes the opening, not there anymore. So I start to walk my arm in, I bring my knee in, and I make sure to take my knee all the way through and down until I physically touch the mat with my knee. Okay, anything less is no good. Now I need to break his grip. I can come back to a Kimura, or I see Jonathan's 4 fingers there, so that's a legal grip for me to take, so I'll actually come this way to break his grip. That's gonna be very easy. Okay, remember, you can't grab individual fingers, but you can grab all 4. So if you're ever in a grip fighting position with somebody and the 4 fingers have been left out here, that's probably the best lever of them all. At the very end, just make sure you grab hold of it and pull through their own middle finger and thumb. Now I start putting his hand behind his back. I roll through at my wrist, and you'll notice again, I've got his wrist, and then I go no daylight to get to my own wrist. Can I have your lecture? Not this, here where I'm thinking, oh, but I have to go to my own wrist here. No, I need to get that daylight out between his wrist and my wrist. So whatever that takes, now I'm in a better position. This is not so good, okay? Once we're here, elbow up to armpit, knuckles to the scapula, elbow down to the floor. We beat that shoulder right in here, and on this last piece here, when it comes time to finish, let's be sure that we go elbow to elbow, armpit to elbow. So I'm not back here like this. I want my left foot closer to his head in my grip rather than further away if possible. Okay, but I want the foot to come in close, and I want it to be slightly in front of the Kimura itself. Okay, that's gonna make it much easier for me to push with my 2 legs into the corner when it's time to finish. Okay, so that your 2 legs are what actually push you into the finish with the Kimura. In a situation like this, if her hand is above her chest, I'll take a palm up grip, pull, and turn it into the pushing hand. So I'll show you that in a second. If her hand is anywhere below her chest like this, we're gonna take a palm down grip and push and lock the Kimura in place, okay? So the 2 grips would be, I would normally have my chest down on this. I would come up here and get a palm up grip. Now I pull the palm up grip until it's down below the chest. once it's down below the chest, it's not so hard to lock up with the Kimura. If the hand has started below the chest, then from my initial pin, I just keep it below the chest. I bring my elbow to my partner's elbow, and then we can go in and easily lock up that frame and go into our finishing positions. So we focus mostly on penetrating the frame arm first here at the elbow. Totally fine way to go. That's one way to start the Kimura going. That would be going for the frame arm first. The other one is to come here, and if the hand is lower than the chest, is to keep it lower than the chest, build up that frame arm position, and then go through and get our finish. This is also really useful because it puts my knee right there to separate the hands, makes the step over the head very easy, and we can go in and finish. And then our last one, now I want to start at the hands again, but the hand is above the chest. So we're going to go palm up, pull it down, and then lock. Okay? So here we are, I'm in this side control position. I might have an initial crossface here, but I start going up, and I find Allison's hand. I put my chest right on my hand so that her hand isn't going up. The only way it's going is down towards her belt. So I start pulling it down. I get a grip here on the wrist. I go up and over the top, and I go elbow over elbow from the very beginning. Now I bring the frame arm through. I don't try to push the hand down from here. I just lace the frame arm over and through. Now I pick her up off the ground. I take that step over the head. Now when I go to take the hand behind the back, I can clear her whole body, adjust elbow to shoulder, adjust my own grip, armpit and elbow to her elbow, and then aim those knuckles at the scapula, lead with the elbow to the floor, and then before you go anywhere else, up tall to beat the shoulder, flatten them out over their own hand, and then that nice elbow to elbow position for the finish. Okay? So I know there's a lot going on there, but we're looking at a setup now, a way to get into a side Kimura. Okay? The first method was sawing in, turning the palm over. The second method was palm down or palm up. Palm up when their hands are up. Palm down when their hands are down. Okay? Between the palm up and the palm down and the frame arm, you're going to be able to get the two grips needed for the Kimura. You do want to step over someone's head to finish a side Kimura. They obviously don't want that, so they're going to do different things to try and stop you. One of them is they're going to try to get their head to go up. As they notice that you commit more to the hold, they want their head up so you don't complete it. Okay? So one thing we have to keep in mind is it's actually totally fine and preferable for me to go down to the bottom as long as I keep the hand behind the back. What we're going to do is I'm going to jackknife my body and roll to the bottom position. I keep his hand behind his back, I go up and forward, and I have Curtis follow me up and into this position here. Why would I ever do this? Part of this is because when you go to step over someone's head, sometimes you're going to get reversed. More importantly, the hand behind the back is so mechanically strong, it's better than any pin in jiu-jitsu. So if you're under side control, but you've got the hand behind the back, you are the one in the driver's seat. Okay? I'm trying to, in many different ways, give you this notion that if you've got someone's hand behind their back, I don't care where you are winning. Prioritize the Kimura, and you're going to be on your way. So what we do, we keep this Kimura, and even though Curtis is on top of me, I continue pulling with my left elbow down to the floor. Marcus is going to have to roll over this shoulder. If he rolls over this shoulder, he'll injure himself with Kimura. So he's just going to take a nice easy roll over on this side. When that happens, my legs will go up in the air so that he can pick me up on the roll. So we start our movement. And he carries me up and over. Now my leg is over his head, and we can get into our favorite finishing position using the side Kimura. But this idea that I got the hand behind the back, so we're going in the direction of submission, but now I can't seem to clear their head with my leg. What do we do? Well, the first one, what we'll practice now is following them through the roll, so that even if you end up on bottom, you've still got the hand behind the back, and when they pitch over a second time, now you've got good cover to the head. Okay? An alternative to that is you don't get the sense that they will follow you through the roll, so you have to find a way to cover their head while still on top of them. Okay, no problem. We use a reverse Homer Simpson in order to clear the head and get into a finishing pin. More example. So side control position, side Kimura for the start. We saw that whenever we have somebody's arm available, we can go in and use the thumb here to start securing the beginnings of a Kimura. We saw that by taking the frame arm in, even if I can't reach from here, it's not really that hard for us to just go elbow to elbow and start a lifting action that starts to pick his body up off the ground. Now I come in and I lock up my grip. I put his hand here behind his back and I start to flatten him out. Now, I have nothing covering Jonathan's head at this point. I need something covering his head. One way to do this is for me to go into a position where I sit my hip facing his legs. Now I go into a tall tripod and I set my right knee down where I want it. I step my left leg forward where I want it. And now I do the same thing as when we started. I move independent hands to elbow position. That lets me pick him up off the ground a second time. That lets me lock everything in. That lets me flatten the hand out over the body. And then finally pull for the finish. So again, side control position here. We see that hand in front. I don't have a locked set of grips yet, so we go with the thumb. If I was able to lock my hands from the very beginning, it would be fine to operate without a thumb. But when your hands are not locked initially, use the thumb when you grab their arm. Now we find our way going underneath their arm. We focus on taking the elbow and pointing it up at the ceiling. Now I can go in and take my actual Kimura grip. I bring the hand under the back and I start to put my hips over and flatten out his arm. But I've got nothing clearing his head around, nothing keeping his head down. No problem. We turn so that our hips face their hips. Now from this position, I'm going to come up into a tripod. I walk and put my knee here next to his ear and his shoulder. Now I set my elbow down, I take that big step forward, pick up, and we go through into our finishing position. Okay? Alternatively, I could have gone through a forward roll, have him go on top and follow me, and get into the finish. The first thing that we want to do to understand the potential of these new set of attacks is to talk about T-Kimura and how it relates to what we'll look at next and how it's sort of familiar to some things that we've covered in the recent past. So what I'm going to do is go through a front headlock and a corner reversal, or sumigaishi from the front headlock, so you can see a turnover and how we end up facing the ceiling. I go into a T position with Heather, and then this will relate us back to Kimura. Okay, so Heather and I are here, we're working, and I'm able, somehow or another, to bring her head down and away, and I'm able to get to just the beginnings of the front headlock here. Now we saw that we were able to come into a front headlock, and we could sometimes step in, sit with control, and just guide our partner over in a position like this. Now we are both facing up right now. I've got the front headlock, inside grip, with both of us facing up. To make the most of this position, it's a good idea for me to walk into a T position with Heather. Now once we're in a T, I have a whole host of different attacks that I can work my way into, okay? But it all came from this position here, where we're essentially parallel to one where now I have a T in relation to her. She would be the stem and I'd sort of be the hat of the T, okay? So there's T positions that we can get into from the front headlock. And there's a T position we can get into from the Kimura. Now the T position for Kimura is actually extremely easy to get into, and once you're there, you can take a whole bunch of different directions and take on a whole bunch of different attacks. And I'll show you a whole bunch of them today. Some of you will have preferences for, say, side triangles versus arm lock. Some of you will prefer to take it back, but we'll go over a few of the different options here. Okay? So before we can even do those options, what we need to look at is the T-Kimura position itself. So what's involved is I'm in a T position relative to my partner. I go over and I lock up a Kimura grip on his near arm. Now let's just look at a few things to start. From a T-Kimura position, Jonathan cannot turn away from me freely. If he goes to turn to his right to get away, keep on. Obviously he's not going to just go through my arms here. So it's not that reasonable for him to turn away from me.
Now he could stay where he is now, but that's not the best tactic for him to take because it's very easy for me to get up, put his hand behind, and go into the finish. Okay? So now he's limited, can't turn away, doesn't want to stay here, he's got to turn into me. You know he's going to turn into you, and he has to turn into you. So anytime somebody turns in, it's all about the position of his elbow versus my elbow. If I can lift his elbow off the floor, I can put him right back down to the mat. Okay? Even if he gets all the way up to his knees here, and I do nothing else but lift his elbow, he comes right down to the mat. So we call this a T-Kimura mat return. And it's a skill that we'll want to practice in order to become comfortable with T-Kimura. Now, when Jonathan goes to get up, watch what happens. He has to scissor his leg, and he tries to withdraw his elbow inside of mine. Here it was before, now it's inside. If he can do this, he's out of the T-Kimura. So our whole thing, is not to worry about him scissoring his legs, that's going to happen, but to know that as long as my elbow and my armpit surround his elbow, even if he does come up, I'm going to be able to put him down. So as he goes to come up, I bring my armpit forward so I crowd his elbow. Now, a small drive with my right elbow and lift with my left elbow will usually be enough to put him right down. But we can go further than that and get extreme pressure to put him down by using a backhand pry. So let's say Jonathan comes up this time, and I'm not so used to this yet. I'm trying to figure out how to make this T-Kimura work. I'm going to take my frame arm and I'm going to unlock it, and I'm going to turn it around, okay? So that I can bend my wrist backwards this time. And in this position here, it's very easy for me to lift his elbow up. And you'll see that this is the exact same frame arm position that we started with today. Okay, so we're getting a little bit more insight into this, how this frame arm affects the Kimura. So here we are, we've got Kimura grip. Jonathan goes to get up, and I am just struggling to put him back down to the ground. No problem. We unlock the frame hand, and we turn it around. Now I use this frame hand by bending the wrist back and lifting his elbow up. Look how my right elbow and left elbow pry in opposite directions to return him to the ground. Okay? So we'll do this 3 times. The first one, Jonathan comes up, I keep locked hands, and I try to return him to the mat. Okay? If I had a lot of trouble with that, then on the next one, I'm going to go with an open hand pry. Okay, so Jonathan comes up here. Now I go open hand, and I do the same thing, pry him down to the mat. Okay? I'm going to go a 3rd time. Either one of them, either the Kimura grip or the open hand pry, and then once they're down on the floor, I'm going to scissor my own legs to come up and finish with a side Kimura. So here we are, I've got my Kimura, Jonathan goes to get up. I either stay with the Kimura or I use that open hand pry to bring him back down to the mat. Now I scissor my legs and I re-grip the Kimura. My head goes on the floor so that I can switch my stance right over top of his head. Look how my right knee is already by his ear and shoulder. I step my left leg forward, and he's about to be that flattened out guy with Kimura. So we know that we need to point the elbow up at the ceiling. As I row my right elbow down, my left elbow points up. I get his hand behind his elbow. I push my pelvis forward to put him over his own hand, and now I sweep elbow to elbow with him. Now a small throttle and pull, and we get our finish. So here we are, we've got T-Kimura position just like we have been working with regular Kimura grip. Now, Allison goes to come up on me. I've got my frame arm still in place. I've got my right elbow here at her shoulder. Okay? What I want to do is stop her shoulder from getting any closer and focus on lifting her elbow off the ground. Okay? So the way I do that is I bring her hand towards her shoulder, and now I lift her elbow with my elbow. I do that by straightening out my left arm. Okay? So my left arm, from this bent position, it straightens and I turn my bicep out. I don't just straighten like this, where my elbow is pointing like this. I want to turn it here. This is why the open hand frame works so well, is because it encourages you to turn your upper arm, your bicep out. You could also think of it like you're pointing your armpit forward. Okay? So for the T-Kimura again, here's my initial grip. Allison goes to come up, and I'm able, even if she goes all the way up to her knees, to there, you can still return them to the mat. Even if they walk around your head, you can return them to the mat. We go lifting at their elbow, and they come right down. Now she comes up a second time. When I do my open-handed pry, I'm going to use the back of my hand and focus on flipping my wrist backwards so that it's actually like this, one of the few times we'll ever do it. Okay. So we're in, I flip my wrist back. Now that puts a much stronger lever force on her elbow and makes it easy to return her to the mat. Now what I'm aiming for is a Kimura grip that incorporates that backhand frame like this, that backhand pry. So how am I going to get this to happen while my hand is still turned over? Well, you'll see my knuckles, my punching knuckles of my left hand are actually on the far side of my wrist right now, as opposed to the near side of my wrist. When I go into a backhanded frame and I put my wrist all the way over, it forces me into a position where when I turn my hands over, I'm in the correct position for Kimura. Okay, so here I'm in the correct position, my knuckles over the far portion of my wrist. Now I'm in the incorrect position with my knuckles on the inside portion of my wrist. The difference between this and this is success and failure. This you'll put people down easily. This you're going to struggle. Okay? So I turn my hand around. Now with my knuckles in the incorrect position, I can't fold my wrist back at all. It's impossible. So I've got to send my wrist through. Now once I'm able to flip my wrist back, I know it's safe to turn my hand over, and I'm going to end up in that good position with my knuckles on the far side. Does everyone see the difference between the two? Okay. So this time Allison goes to come up on me. I first go backhand frame. I make sure that my hand can flip backwards. If I can do that, it's safe for me to turn my hand back over, and a small lift will give me the drop back down to the floor that I'm looking for. Once we get here, I take my left leg and it goes away and out the bottom. My right leg goes forward and over the top, and I let my forehead become a base of support. The reason for this is it lets me stay across her center line. My legs and hips on one side, my head on the other side. If I lift my head up, I'm actually not covering her as well as I could. So my head comes down, I come up, and I put her hand on the ground. Now I've already beat her shoulder. There's no reason for me at this point to take my right leg into Allison's armpit here. I should just go directly to the area between her ear and shoulder, just like this. Okay? So we work here. I've made my way up. I go directly to ear and shoulder. My right elbow rose down to the floor. Was up, now it's down. I step out wide and I pick her body up off the floor. We know that once we're in this position, if the hand goes behind the elbow, it's pretty easy to take it under the back by just throttling the hands. Okay, if I were here, that can be hard to accomplish. So I go further than that. Now her hand is further up than her elbow. So it's going to be pretty easy for me to use a throttle, put her hand behind her back by her scapula, push my pelvis forward, and put her over her own hand. Now my step is always in front of my Kimura, never just in line with it or worse, behind it, always in front of it. I sweep my own elbow out and over hers, and now I just give a nice, easy pull, and we get our finish. If you get what I've shown up to this point, you will be prepared to do almost everything you ever wanted to do with Kimura. I'm going to show you lots of really fun stuff after this, but this is really all you have to know to get that ball rolling. Okay? Putting somebody down into a T-Kimura, and then there's just ways of resolving after that. So what I want to do now is go over, well, what happens in a T-Kimura? Why would you ever want to be there in the first place? Well, there's lots of good reasons. And then also, how do you get to a T-Kimura? It doesn't seem like something that comes up until you start doing it, and then you will get there almost every single round of sparring. You might have seen some of my the higher belted students here or myself. This T-Kimura position comes up all the time. Okay, it's something where you have a scramble occurring. There was a takedown and it failed, and now the two athletes are sort of looking for control. Neither one of them has control. There was a guard pass. It didn't quite resolve, and now one athlete is sort of looking to recover guard. The other one's looking for a new guard pass. Standing position. One of them tried to throw, missed it, and now they're vying for control. Anytime that there's not a clear sense of control for at least one of the athletes, that would be something like a scramble. A scramble can be a little bit hard to define just in and of itself, but if one person is not demonstrating a clear sense of control and there's movement, we'll say that's a scramble. Okay? Kimura is one of the best ways to go from a scramble to you're in the driver's seat. Okay? The way you do that is you take a Kimura, you go to the T-Kimura, and then you build into what you actually want to do. Okay? So the T-Kimura is sort of the launching platform for a whole host of attacks. And we get onto this platform a lot of times out of scramble situations. Okay? There are setups to it as well, but we're going to look at what are the options once I've got a T-Kimura. What am I looking to do here? Let's say Jonathan's lying down here, and somehow or another we managed to make it to T-Kimura. We know that when we've got the T-Kimura, if Jonathan does come up towards me, I have a strong ability to return into the mat. And I can do it at this point, I could do it at some point earlier, but we use that open-handed backhand pry to set our hands in the correct position so that we can easily return our partner to the ground. Okay? Now, when Jonathan goes to come up, the first thing we should do is divide our attacks based on which knee am I going to attack him with. So if Jonathan comes up slowly here, and I take my left knee against his left arm underneath his body, we could say we have my left knee as my bottom knee attack. Okay? So if I put my bottom knee in like this, a really strong way for me to attack is to now take my right leg and place a hook here inside of his hip. Now I just pull my heel to my butt, I turn everything across the body, and I draw him in to a back take. Which back take you use is up to you. I can put him here, this is a pretty safe option, or I can take my right leg and go up high above my own knee, and then lock the body triangle. Then I take the one-on-one grip, I go underneath, and we go right into the knee. Okay? So our first attack is from a T-Kimura position, where we can take control and pin him down to the ground at any point in time. We see he starts to come up. Okay, so I slow him down and I put my bottom knee in. My right leg goes up and around. My knee opens, my heel comes in, and I pull my heel to the inside of his thigh. I don't kick him in the groin, I just pull right up to the thigh, then I pull him across our center line. Now my left leg goes in and over the top. This would be scoring by 4 points. Now we lock in with body triangle. I score a one-on-one, and we go up into our finish. So let's look at some top knee attacks, because these are also extremely powerful, and you want to be able to play between the two attacks, bottom knee, top knee, and have threats on both sides of them. So we start off the same T-Kimura position here, and again, don't worry, we will get into how to actually get to this position in a little bit, but we'll cover just a couple more things that can happen once you're here. Okay, so we know we've got this T-Kimura position. We know that Jonathan can't really turn away from me because of the Kimura. He can't really stay where he is because I can just come up and go into the side Kimuras that we covered earlier. So really all that's left for him is to come up towards me. When he goes up towards me, we know that it's a battle for elbow position. He wants his elbow inside of mine, I want my elbow inside of his. So we looked at using an open hand or a backhand pry to return him to the mat and regrip so that his elbow never goes inside of our elbow here. And if we can keep this, we can keep this whole T-Kimura position working. Okay? So the next thing we did, Jonathan goes to come up, and I go in with my bottom knee, my top knee goes over his legs, and we ended up going to the back. Okay? But it's not always the best move to just go to someone's back from here. Another good way to work is, let's say Jonathan goes to come up on me here, is to take my top knee here and use that either over his head as a cross-face leg, or over his head and through his armpit as the first half of a triangle. Okay, so we'll take those in that order. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start levering him down and putting my bottom knee close. My right leg will go heel to shoulder, then I will go knee over his head. Once I've got my knee over his head, I pull down to the floor. Once I've got his head down to the floor, I bring my chest forward and my armpit forward to his elbow. I take my right knee down to the floor and my left leg moves back so I can use it to get up. Because I've got his head trapped, it's pretty easy for me to step up, row my right elbow down, row my left elbow up, get his hand behind his elbow, and tuck it in behind his back. I push my pelvis forward, elbow to elbow position, and we get a nice strong finish. Okay, so this next attack, the first top knee attack, it's just using the top knee as a cross-face leg like we would for any arm lock to put them down to the floor so we can get up into that nice side Kimura. So one item that we definitely want to add in is the use of a side triangle as a way of amplifying the Kimura lock itself. It's a very, very strong attack. It is a strangle like any triangle, but it's also just a very good way to restrain somebody while you make any adjustments you need to get to the side Kimura, or we'll see a Kimura inside the triangle itself. So let's take this from the T-Kimura position here. And we know that if Jonathan tries to turn away or stay here, this is not such a good idea for him. He's probably going to come up towards me. When he comes up towards me, this is all about elbow position. My elbow versus his elbow. If I've got good elbow position, I can just return him back to the mat. Okay. Now, as I return him back to the mat, I start looking for my various attacks. We can go with bottom knee attacks, and we can go with top knee attacks. Okay, so as Jonathan goes up here, I can also just slow him down while I pick up on whatever pattern it is on how he does get up. Does he get up very quickly and leave the elbow behind? Does he tend to give me bottom knee attacks, things like this? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the T-Kimura and we're gonna use it to bring our partner back down to the mat. In a standard arm lock position, I might take my right leg over his head and then make an adjustment towards an arm lock. But a lot of times people will be suspicious of having their head covered with your leg, and they probably should be. Because this usually means an arm lock is coming. So they'll try to do something which will enable this weird looking configuration. Now, sometimes it happens because he has no idea what's going on. Okay, that you shouldn't rely on that. Usually though, he's playing the game of how am I going to keep my hands locked and protected from Kimura, and at the same time deal with this looming cross-face leg that can come over. But sometimes the way people do it is they will lock their hands in a way where they've got a hand that can try to interfere with the leg, but they feel relatively safe in the rest of their grip. Does everyone see how Jonathan's using the right arm to interfere, but his arm is still somewhat safe? Okay? Whenever we see this sort of thing, we can just take our knee over to their knee, and we use heel and knee together to break through and back heel like this. Now I've got a one in, one out situation. I've got one of his arms and his head between my two legs. I've also got this nice Kimura grip that gives me good control over his body. Now, my right foot could hook under my left knee and I would have a side triangle on him. And in a side triangle, you can finish a lot of different ways. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes you'll land in a perfect side triangle and you can put them out right there. You can also go in and use a push, a one-handed push Kimura on the arm inside of the triangle. You can also go with a push-pull Kimura, a little bit more powerful. Okay? But if you want to actually finish a strong side triangle, what you need to do is unlock your legs, pull your bottom leg back, and put your foot on the ground like a kickstand. Now I'm going to come up on my head and point my belly button at the floor. I straighten out my two legs so that my left leg is further out from under his head. I want it like a pillow by the nape of his neck. Now my right leg straightens out, and now when I go to back heel and return to the triangle, it's very, very tight at this point. I have a good chance of strangling him right here. If for whatever reason that doesn't pan out, I use the separated hands that we have now to put his hand on the floor, put my knees on the floor, and come up into the side Kimura, where we pick the elbow up off the ground. I get his hand to go behind his elbow. Once his hand is behind his elbow, it's safe for me to tuck it under his back. Now I can start crowding his shoulders and flattening his own body over his hand. I take that nice step forward that gives us the ability to sweep out elbow to elbow, and from here we get the finish we're looking for. Side triangle can be a little bit tricky at first, in part because the triangle itself is sort of happening to your side. It's like not in front of you where you can adjust so easily. It's off to the side. So let's look at a couple things that will definitely help clean up the strangling aspect of the side triangle. And when we do that, we open the door even more for things like that side Kimura finish and all the other things that we like to work with. Okay? Side triangle can be used as a pin, it can be used as a strangle, and because it's so powerful in both of those regards, things that follow on to it, like a Kimura, are very, very powerful as well. Because they're dealing with side triangle, and you're just putting the hand behind the back, lifting the elbow, and actually finishing at the arm. So let's say we've got a T-Kimura, and we are interested in going into a side triangle. Jonathan goes to come up on me, and I'm able to return him down to the mat. Now I start bringing my right foot through, and I thread it in, and I look to catch a hold of his elbow and his head. Now I've made an extreme example of this, but this is the error that we need to eliminate. You'll see that my left leg is trapped underneath Jonathan's body. So I can't even lock a triangle right now, much less finish one. So a lot of what we need to do is to get that bottom leg into a position where it can become useful. Ideally, it will be here, where his head is on my leg like a pillow. Okay? The curve in the back of his neck, my leg is filling that in. If he lifts up, this is where most people tend to go. Their leg is too far under the shoulder blades, so then when they go to lock their side triangle, they're able to connect, but they're like, why am I not getting the strangle? It's because you're essentially strangling their back and their shoulder blades. You'll see that right now, here's Jonathan's right arm, here's his tricep and his shoulder. When I go to lock my triangle, what I want to do is get into a position where his shoulder is out, but his elbow and tricep are in, like this. Okay? So now, right here, I can feel his shoulder blade and the muscle of his shoulder. A moment ago, I was like this. Now his muscle of his shoulder and shoulder blade are in the triangle. This is going to interfere with what I want to do. So what I need is something that lets me get into a position like this, where there's much less shoulder in the lock and just his neck and his arm. Okay, this is the position we want. Okay, the way we do this is to turn belly down and straighten out the legs. So let's say we're here. Not the greatest side triangle. I've got my Kimura grip. Now instead of just fiddling around here or trying to pull on his arm and hopefully getting the adjustment, which can work, but it's not as reliable, I'd say, I pull my heel back, put my foot on the floor. Now my left leg starts to draw back and I bend it so that I can kickstand off my left foot. I'm going to use this foot to get up and turn my stomach down to the floor. By straightening my left and straightening my right leg, when I come back to the triangle, it's very, very tight around the neck. Now I can make the next decision. Am I going to finish with the triangle? Am I going to finish with the push Kimura? Or am I going to finish with the side Kimura? Okay? But the big idea is when things are caught up underneath him and you don't have a finishing side triangle, what we need to do is get this bottom leg out of there. Okay? So the way we do it, we pull with the right heel, pull with the left heel. The left foot on the ground helps me kickstand up onto my head. Once I'm on my head, my legs straighten out on both sides. That places my left leg into the correct position, and when I return to the triangle, it helps me gather up his arm in the position that I want for the actual finishing attack. Now I've got a good chance to finish wrist, Kimura, 2-on-1 Kimura, or the king of them all, the side Kimura, where we come right back up again and pick up on our partner's arm. We start to beat their arm and tuck it under, and now we can just shift and go in to our finish. Okay? But the big movement that you want to make is your bottom leg, which is your support leg here, goes toes against the mat. That's going to help you kickstand up, straighten your legs, and then relock the actual triangle. Okay? And then once it's relocked, you have 3, 4, 5 different submissions you can go into. We're working for a side triangle here. Jonathan goes to come up on me, and I bring that bottom knee in to start. I would like to bring my top leg into something useful, but he catches it in the air. So we go in and we lock here with the right leg. Now, I want my left leg to come out, and what I'm trying to do is to get my two legs to touch each other. So look how my right leg is pulling down and into the floor, and you can see that there's tension because Jonathan's body starts to rise as I pull with my leg.
What I'm not doing is locking a triangle that exists around him but does not constrict at all. It's easy because the arrangement of our bodies to lock a triangle on most people. What I need to do is create tension through the lock here and here, so that when I lock my legs together, those gaps are somewhat eliminated, okay? Now, they're never gonna be completely eliminated unless you go belly down on the person, okay? So my right leg is constantly doing this. My left leg is rising up towards my right leg. So together, it looks like this. If I just, stay right there, Jonathan. Without Jonathan there, it would actually look like this, where I would just pull completely back, but his arm obviously is in the way. So this is the kind of tension we want to aim for. I'm aiming for back here, although I just end up with this right here. But you can see it pulls a bunch of the slack out of the lock. And now I can lock an initial triangle. I might do this to recover any loss in position at the Kimura for the moment. Then we unlock again, and I'm looking to straighten my legs, 1, and then bend the other one, 2. That lets me get up, belly down. Now as I do that, my right leg is retracting back, so that by the time I arrive here, I've got a very tight potential triangle that I can lie down with control. Now I've got a very strong finish, okay? But from the initial triangle, we're just pulling tension one way and locking an initial trap. Now I come up, belly down, and I straighten out my 2 legs. I'm looking to lengthen my legs out here, one with the right and one with the left. Then the left leg coils back so I can complete the movement going belly down. I pull my right leg back, and when I go back to the triangle, it's super, super tight when the lock is set. We can finish with the one hand, the 1-1, or right back up into the side Kimura, where we fold everything up and over. The hand goes behind, we iron them out over their own hand, and then we can finish. We're gonna go from a half guard position this time. Jonathan has my right leg caught up in a half guard, and he's gone in and he's taken an underhook on me. Okay. Now in this position, there's a few different things that are going on. Jonathan has come up on a prop, his right elbow, and he's got an underhook with his left. Now in any position like this, when Jonathan gets here, his underhook works best when my head starts going in this direction here. Okay, this exposes my back and gives him lots of ways to work. So let's always come in, and before we do anything else, let's go overhook and bring our head over our partner's hip like this. Okay, this slows him down enough for me to recognize what's going on and decide what I'm going to do next. Okay, I actually can take a Kimura on the arm that's in front of me here, and I can take a Kimura on his prop arm, the one on the bottom here. We're going to start off attacking this arm here because his head's not in the way. Then we'll look at clearing the head and going in and attacking the other arm. Okay? But to get things started, he's got his underhook, I take my overhook. I'm going to take my left knee and bring it in between his right elbow and his right knee, so he has no elbow escape on his right side. Now I'm going to go across his body 90 degrees, and I'm going to sit my hip down to the floor here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and reach for his legs. It can be either the top or bottom leg. I have a personal preference for going underneath the knee of the bottom leg and grabbing a hold of my own shin like this. Okay? This is just because when I do this here, my right hand underneath, this applies gi, no gi, doesn't matter, but you could work pant, bottom pant, or like I'm doing now, underneath my own leg. This allows me to go further across his body, and now we're starting to look for Kimura. Okay? This is the arm I'm going to Kimura. What I need to do is get my frame arm to come in and start getting my thumb and the back of my hand inside of his arm. Okay? Now you can clearly see, here's the frame arm. The rest of the Kimura is pretty obvious at this point. I'm going to just show you one other detail that you'll find useful here. Just like a lapel feed crossface, anytime you feed a lapel to one of your grips, it will let you do with one hand what normally takes 2 hands. This is no exception. I take the skirt of his gi or the lapel and I put it over his wrist where I might normally grab. I feed it to a frame hand here. Not just my hand, but with my wrist bent back so that there's tension running through it while I grip. Now, with this grip in place, Jonathan will tell you this feels like a legitimate Kimura with the hand in front of the body. Now I've got a free hand to work with. I start taking out my knee, and I look to put my shoulder down on the floor. Now, keep your guard locked. Now I've got my shoulder down on the floor. I'm looking to free my knee. I use one hand on the near leg, one hand on the far leg, and then I start using my shoelaces to pry myself out of this position. And we're in a T-Kimura. Because I've got the lapel grip, I don't need this stopper hand. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and grab a hold of it so that the position itself is a little bit more familiar. Okay? Now at this point, Jonathan can't turn away. He can't stay where he is. He's got to turn into me. If he turns into me, I can put my bottom knee in, place my hook over the top, and turn him over to go towards his back. Okay? I can also return him towards the floor, thread my legs through and around, and from here we're looking to dig in that side triangle. We can adjust the side triangle, or we can just finish right here. You also have, if you are a fan of wrist locks, you have what's called a Maujivaka cow hand in this position, where we take the wrist, we bend it forward, we bend it forward further still. My armpit is under his elbow. So that off of a Kimura, the hand's not coming down, I cover it up and I bend his wrist. We get a wrist lock straight away. So Jonathan has me in half guard here. He's got my right leg tied up, and he's done a good job of getting into an underhook or tight waist, and he has his elbow prop ready to go. So just as a safety measure for me, I go over his arm and I start bringing my head over his hip. This stalls him in terms of being able to progress with his underhook. Okay, now I take my left leg here and I want to be between his elbow and knee, so that when I flatten him out, he doesn't use an elbow-knee escape to get away from me. So I go over the top, I bring my knee in close, and I start to turn down towards his leg here. As I turn down towards his legs, I want to take a grip either on one of his legs or underneath both of them on my own leg. My whole thing is to get his body to start flattening out by lifting his legs up, so that I get into this nice 90-degree angle with him. Once we're in this position, we need to create a frame arm. The frame arm will be my left arm against his left arm, so I'm looking for ways to get my thumb and wrist to start feeding through against his elbow. Once I've got my frame arm in place, I can adjust it so that the back of my hand makes good strong contact with him here. I can go a little further and use either his lapel or even the two lengths of his belt to help reinforce the grip that I'm using. Now this is a great grip to use. I don't always use it because I think that a lot of times when I'm rolling, I have a big advantage once I've got this grip, but it really is helpful for learning how to use Kimura and the Kimura grip. Double belt or lapel that goes over their wrist. You do not have to take it out like we normally would in a lapel feed. You can keep it right where it starts and you lace it right over top of their wrist. Okay? Either way, whether you use a lapel reinforcement or a standard Kimura grip, now I need to free the knee of my trapped leg. So I start bringing my knee and foot close. My elbow helps create an opening for my knee to come out. Once my knee is out, I go under my shoulder and roll. My leg may not come out all the way. Keep it tight, keep it tight, keep it tight. May not come out all the way. No problem. We've got a free leg. We push the inside of the knee and we free ourselves into a T-Kimura. Okay? Now, once we're in T-Kimura, we've got a few ways to go. If he does nothing, I get up and you put a side Kimura on him. If he gets up, I can go bottom knee attack. When my bottom knee comes in, my top leg goes over the top, and we draw our partner over and into a good back attack position. If, on the other hand, we get in a T-Kimura, he starts to come up, and you know what, maybe I'm just not so great at back takes on this side, whatever the reason, I put him back down to the floor, and I consider my options again. This time I see, all right, side triangle's looking pretty good right now, so we go in, and we lock. Just like any triangle, we'll have a trap triangle to start, but it's not really going to take full effect until we readjust it. In a side triangle, the readjustment is almost always a belly down shift where I take my left foot and I pull it back so I can kickstand on my foot. I point my forehead and stomach at the ground and I straighten out my legs and my knees. Now when I return to the triangle,
I have a very, very tight lock around his neck. I can finish the triangle itself. I can finish a one-handed pushing Kimura, a two-handed push and pull Kimura, a wrist lock on the near arm, and best of all, the actual Kimura that we've been looking at. We get that hand down to the floor, we unlock, and come up. One elbow rows down, the other elbow rows up. I fold him up over his own arm, and then from here, we're looking good for the finish. If you get somebody's hand behind their back, I don't care who they are, how strong they are, what the heck is going on. They went from however strong they are to a small fraction of that. And everything you do is built on keeping the hand behind the back. Whether it's your elbows, your hip position, the movement of your legs, it's also that their attempts to get out and put that hand into an anterior position all fail, all the time, until they're tapping. Okay, so that's our number one priority when we can get it. If the hand goes behind the back, it's going to stay behind the back, even at the cost of going down to the bottom position. Okay? So let's look at how we can approach that, and it will help us to also look at how a Kimura can occur from the half guard, because it will take a similar roll through quality as what we've just done. So one way we can go about understanding this hand behind the back, the transition to get on top, and the priority that these things take is from a half guard position. Now, nice thing is, fairly recently, we went over hip check. We went over what I should do once I get to a hip check in order to attack my partner. If you remember, everything we did was all built on going after this side of the body, whether it be tight waist, outside hook. This should all be looking somewhat familiar now. There are other ways to go after that arm. For example, there's good Russian and arm drag grips. But the big thing is that the more I go after this arm, the more Jonathan will be exposing this arm to try and defend. Okay? So one example, I come in, I take underhook or tight waist on Jonathan. He takes an elbow to elbow position with me here and moves his head over my hip like this. Now, this underhook is there, but it's not that useful. Look at this, just flopping around. You can take this right here. Okay? So what we need to do is build the same mechanics of Kimura on this arm before we get put down like this. Okay, so how do we do that? We've got our hip check in position. I'm not going to go too far into how to do the hip check. Just check out the YouTubes if you want that information. That's all right there. We want to attack this arm. Now, what we need to do is get a hold of the wrist in some way. It's not so important that I stop this wrist from moving around. I just need to know where it is. My intention is to get my head and my elbow and armpit above his elbow. Always the frame arm, armpit and elbow. So I go out to the side here, and I take a Kimura grip. Try to avoid doing this and going straight up to their torso, and then aiming at a Kimura. Now I've got a poor frame arm, and he can potentially block me on the way up. So instead of going this direction, we're gonna go out to the side. So we go Kimura here, okay? Now the next thing that you gotta avoid is don't lie down straight back and try to put the hand behind the back. They'll always put their hand inside their thigh, and you'll get stuck here. So, a little bit. We go out to the side, armpit and elbow, go flush. I thread through using the back of my hand first as a frame arm, and lock. Now I make sure I've throttled, and I make sure I've gotten as close to his elbow with my armpit and elbow as I can. Of course, we never go beyond that, but we want to go right up next to it. Now, the key to this next movement is I put my foot on the floor, and I push my hips towards my grip. So the knot of my belt goes forward towards the grip. Now look what just happened. When I go to put his hand behind his back, it's so hard for him to resist me because his back is so much lower. Now I line up, and just like we have a preferred way to line up when we're on top, our preferred way to line up is head, armpit, his elbow, my elbow, and his two shoulders in a relatively straight line. Okay? The moment this happens and the hand's behind the back, this is the roll through position we just came from, but where I was on bottom side control. I'm just in the bottom of the half guard right now. So what I do, I pull with my left elbow. I don't push with my right hand, no. Pull with the left elbow down to the floor
and look in that direction. Okay? What's going to happen is Jonathan will, don't do it yet, Jonathan will end up rolling over his left shoulder. I'm going to lift my 2 legs so he picks me up and carries me through the roll. Okay, so now Jonathan goes through his roll, I pick up my legs, and I let him carry me up and over. I didn't have to do anything fancy with my legs there. I just let him pick me up. Now, this should look familiar. This is the half guard position we came from yesterday. Jonathan locks his legs, no problem. We know that we just need to free the knee of the trapped leg. Now I can go through a roll and get to a finish. Sometimes you'll land here and they'll have a good bite on your knee. Good bite right here, yeah. And they think that this is gonna save them. Never will it save them. I've got his hand behind his back. It's over. You might as well just give up now. We can go in and just grab the blade of the hand and tuck it in. And now I've got all the hand assist in the world that I need to free my leg. I know what you're saying now. I've seen it. Your hands are a little large. That's not gonna work for me. Keep the frame arm in, take their lapel, and reinforce it just like this. Now you can do with one hand what normally takes 2 and free your knee. Alternatively still, we keep the figure 4 grip and I just use my elbow to free my own knee. You'll see I don't have any concern with whether he grabs onto his belt. I can always deal with that. I pitch down to his shoulder, I roll through, and I put my legs underneath his head. Now we're in that T-Kimura position. Just to review some of the basics here, Jonathan can't turn away from me because of the Kimura grip. Try to turn away. Okay. If he stays where he is, that's no good because I'm just going to scissor my legs and come up and pin him, and then we pick up that elbow, tuck the hand in, push the pelvis forward, and get our finish. So that's no good for Jonathan. So he's got to come up. When he comes up, I practice putting him back down. I turn my palm, and I use an open-handed pry to return him to the mat. He comes up a second time, and I can return him to the mat, or my knee goes in, I lift with my elbow, I place my hook in, and I go from left to right into a nice back kick situation. In a half guard situation, we're able to attack the outside arm. Normally we attack the right arm with tight waist, underhook to like this, but this time we go in and we secure the wrist. I want to go over to her elbow. My head, my armpit, and my elbow all go over, out to the side, to her arm so that I can lock. Now I don't stay here and try to pull. I take my hips towards my hands. Okay? Notice how her form is almost across my belt. That's how much I've moved at this point here. I've got flush contact. I start a pull with my left elbow that takes her hand into a position where I can get it behind the back. Now if I'm in a position like this, I want to take the time to line myself up so that my head, my armpit and elbow, her elbow, and her 2 shoulders make a relatively straight line. This makes it so that I can throttle. And now when Allison goes to roll over her left shoulder, I just lift my legs into the air. And she will always carry me through the roll. Now I've still got the Kimura. I just need to free the knee of my trapped leg. A forward roll on my end puts us in the T-Kimura. Okay. At this point, there's 1,000 different things we can do. To get us back to side Kimura, I'm going to encourage everyone to do this. Allison comes up once. I use that open-handed pry to lift her elbow once. I relock my Kimura, and I take my heel and I dig through so that my right leg captures her far arm and her head. 1, and I can ask you to lift. I don't want to tear your hair there, Allison.
Thanks.
We go in and we lock the initial triangle. From the triangle, use that to come up and just finish with the side Kimura that we like to use. We're going to focus in now on T-Kimura and some of the attacks that can come about there. Okay, Jonathan, come here. So T-Kimura again. Jonathan, can I have your feet that way? Right up here. We are in on a Kimura grip, and my legs are more or less perpendicular to Jonathan's center line, so we form the shape of a T. Now, just as a quick review, it's not realistic for Jonathan to try and turn away from me because I have the Kimura lock. It's not tactically smart for him to stay here because I get up and I can break him down with a side Kimura. So really I should expect him to try to get up and go towards me, okay? Now, he can go pretty far going up towards me, and I can still be successful with this position. You don't want to be intimidated just because somebody starts to come up. Okay, as long as you have your elbow and your armpit close to theirs, you can slow them down, stop them, encourage them to come up, and then stop them. You are in control of this whole scenario. Okay, so Jonathan goes to get up on me, and I let him get all the way up to his knees. I can use this to help practice returning him to the mat. So we use that open hand pry, and we bring him back down with control. Okay. Now, the first attack we did was when he comes up like that, I catch him somewhere along the way by putting my bottom knee in. Okay, so my left knee has now made it in by his hip. Now I just place my right hook over the top, and from here we can start turning him over and going on to the back in different kinds of ways. But my hooks are not necessarily in the best position, and going underneath like this can be a little bit risky. Okay, so what we're going to do is use the bottom hook here to lift and remove him from my legs. Now I use the Kimura grip and scissor my legs to come up and over the top of him here. Okay, now I'm in an even better attacking position. Let's look at a few of the options that I have from here. The first one is to go back into a side Kimura. So all we do is we keep our grip. I notice where his defensive arms are. I see that I can break it down with just a knee. So I do that, I lift up, we get the elbow to the shoulder line, the knuckles to the scapula, and then from here, you all know what to do to get the finish. Okay. So that's one option. Very good option to work with. Another good option is to take the back now that I'm on top of him. Okay, the key element here is that I need to keep his elbows surrounded with my armpit, my elbow, and my chin, and I'm going to start a drive that goes to his elbow and then his far hip. So what I want to avoid is going like this and sliding myself over him. Instead, what I want to do is get my chin down by my hands, use the top of my sternum to start turning his body by bringing my head right over his far elbow. Now I'm going to put a blocker here behind his head. I'm going to put my knee as a reinforcement and tuck it underneath. Now I go across towards his opposite hip. My left knee comes up, and it's safe for me now to go down and reach out for that single cross grip. Can I move this up just a second? So I was here. I've got the blocker behind the head, my bicep and elbow controlling the back of his head, my right knee backing up that right arm. Now I go ear to ear, so that even if his arm were long out here to the side, I can always go after it and reach. If I were here, not long enough, ear to ear, plenty long enough, we grip and bring everything in. Now we have a similar set of options. We can go to the side Kimura, or we can go to take the back. We have a few other submissions. You're probably familiar with all of them that we can go to from here. One of them is going to be an arm lock from this position, just like I'm in right now. I'm going to take my left knee, put it on his ribs, and now I need to get my right leg over his head as a cross-face leg. The key to doing this is to keep my hips lower than his shoulder as I move, take short, choppy steps out to the side, and counterbalance this leg by taking my head towards his knee. Okay? When I do this, my right leg starts to feel very light. If I get to this position and for whatever reason Jonathan tries to turn towards me, I use the frame arm of the Kimura to keep him in place. My left arm keeps him in place. If I need a little bit more horsepower behind that, I just turn the palm up, grip, and I can keep him in place. Okay, so that same open hand palm. My head goes moving, walking, and now I want to get my knee to cover his face, and then I pull my heel back like this. Super important, the heel pulls all the way back. Now I need my second leg over, so we go opening at the knee, and I take my torso leg over the top. My personal preference is to take that torso leg not just over the top, but through and underneath for a 3/4 arm lock, where I've got two cross-faced legs. My right leg started on top, the left leg came in, and now it stays on top. Okay? Now we go elbow to wrist. We get the finish that we're looking for. Since it's his left arm, I want to put his elbow against my left hip, raise the fulcrum a little bit, and you got your finish ready to go. The last bit, I got this 3/4 arm lock. I'm going to go ahead and grab his far elbow, bring it in. I move my cross-faced leg off his head. Most of the time when you do that, people will start to come up. I encourage him to come up, and I use my knee behind his head as a blocker, and my left leg going forward. So my left knee advances and my right knee comes in. Now I grab a hold of my own shin. I lock a triangle so that my lock is directly behind his head. And then from here, we can go right into a strong triangle finish. Okay? So what we're doing right now is going from a T-Kimura to their back. Doesn't really play out exactly right, so we get on top and get ready to take their back a second time. What we're really trying to do for this class is to practice using Kimura grip to get into arm locks, back takes, and triangles, because we're going to quickly see those things crop up in all kinds of areas that we've been hunting around in so far. So let's say we've got T-Kimura position here. We know that from this position, it's not really easy for him to turn away from me because of the Kimura. He can't really stay where he is because I'll come up and pin him with the standard side Kimura, or maybe a side triangle. So we know that he has to get up and turn into me. Okay? We know the way to winning that battle is to win the battle for the elbow, so that my armpit and my elbow surrounding his allow me to lift it and keep him on the floor. Okay? So we practice, when Jonathan comes up now, we practice using either the Kimura grip itself as it is, or that backhand pry and frame to return him down to the ground. Okay? Oftentimes you'll use this a couple of repetitions to arrange your legs for your attacks. Okay? The first attack that we did, if Jonathan were to come up, is I slow him down with the Kimura so that I can bring my bottom knee in. And this bottom knee attack makes it pretty easy for me to place a hook and go on and finish. Okay? Now, let's say he comes up another second time here, and I start going with my bottom knee attack, but I don't get the hook here at his hip. I get it to here at his shoulder. Okay? This is also very good for me. I could potentially break his grip and hide his hand behind his back and attack his neck from here. But it's a little bit unstable to attack so directly because my bottom hook is not across his body. So instead of going to trap the arm like that, I would say take that foot over the top and use a bite from the hollow of your knee here in their shoulder to start pinning them down towards the ground here. Okay? Now, when I'm in this position, I actually have a rear triangle on him. Okay? I've got a Kimura grip now. My right foot is laced into his right forearm, and my left leg is relatively free. What I want to do is sit up into a position where I can go wrist to wrist with him. I point both of my palms towards me, and I look to bring his knuckles to my chest while I push with my other leg away. Now I keep with one hand his knuckles to my chest, and I reach forward and hand assist by grabbing my leg. You'll see that I've pulled my foot above my knee so that when I make an adjustment to lock the triangle, it's super tight from the beginning. My foot is flexed, my left shoelaces go behind his back, then I go inside the lock, never outside the lock. I go inside the lock and I adjust a second time, looking to scoot up and away from him. I want my hips as high behind the back of his head as possible. Then I go to relock the triangle. Now, when this arm is extended in this position, it exposes his neck to the strangle. When he locks his hands together, it's not a problem that because of the grip itself, it's that it tends to draw the elbow into this position here, which reduces the amount of contact I can get for a good strangle. So we always want to keep those knuckles to the chest. You'll be impressed at how you can just use one hand with their knuckles on your chest and control them for a long period of time. They're not going anywhere. I can use hand assist all I want. I can make different adjustments here. So we've got a rear triangle. We lock up and we get those shoelaces behind the back. Now, when it's time to finish a rear triangle, the support leg, the one that crosses over, that knee goes down towards the strangle leg. I don't squeeze my knees together, and I definitely don't turn in this direction. I keep everything on its side. My support knee goes down towards the floor, and we get a good finish right here. Okay, but that's not all you have here. You also have a nice wrist lock. Some of you are fans of wrist locks here. You also have a nice Kimura where we come up and we lock another Kimura grip here. Because his head is trapped, this is a pretty strong Kimura that you can work with. I just try to bring his hand outside of my knee, and we get the finish right there inside the triangle. The last one we would want to look at is I have his left arm inside the triangle, so I can go to his arm. Anytime I've got someone's left arm, I want their left elbow by my left hip bone. So I might go here and pass off into an overwrap arm lock with my hand on my thigh. Now at this point, I just I make sure to track his elbow. I give him a little bridge, and I've got the finish ready to go. Okay, so now we're gonna go T-Kimura into a rear triangle and finish with the triangle, the wrist lock, the Kimura, and the arm lock. Okay, so I'll demonstrate this again, but it's T-Kimura, and we're going into a triangle from the back, and then something that gives us the finish. One last attack into this T-Kimura, and that will complete not basic, it's not a basic switch, like the fundamental attacks out of a T-Kimura will be more or less complete. And then we can start going and looking at getting into this T-Kimura. Okay, so remember we've got T-Kimura position, we're both chest up, so really there's not a Kimura finish as a submission from here. If I wanted to finish the submission, I might need to come up and start breaking him down like we did before. Okay, that's definitely an option, especially if he tries to stay here and wiggle his way out. He's not really going to turn away from me just because of the frame arm if he goes to turn this way or turn away down. This by itself will keep him in place. So he's pretty limited now. He has to turn into me. We know that when he turns into me, he can get up pretty far, and as long as I know how to put him down to the mat using the backhand frame and dropping the elbows, I can always return him to the floor. Okay? Then we started looking at, well, I returned him to the floor, what are my options attacking him to getting ahead of him? Well, if he comes up, one of them was to use a bottom knee to go in, dump him over my hip, and then we can go to the back. It's a great way to attack. Another one is that when he comes up, I start with the same bottom knee, but now I hook here into his arm. And it's like an arm trap when we go to take somebody's back. Instead of just taking the back though, we started splitting things apart, and so that we could get into this attacking position here. We went in, secured the knuckles, locked an initial triangle, and then we hand assist. 1, 2, and we're ready to finish. And anytime you've got a triangle, you've also got Kimura, wrist lock, and arm lock. Okay? There's going to be times when your partner goes from this position and they try to turn to their left to get on top of you. Okay? And they put themselves into a front triangle now. So now we have another triangle we can work with. We scoop here inside the legs, and we get our finish. The reason we bring this attack into play for practice is so that I can get used to what happens when we're in this kind of situation here. When this happens, we do that same independent hands Kimura that we did earlier with the side triangle. I take a grip here at his elbow and pull. I take a grip here at his wrist. Now I switch my lock. I bring my right heel forward, and I lock the triangle the opposite way. Now I can line up with him. My armpit, elbow, and shoulder will line up with his two shoulders. I go in and lock my Kimura grip, and we can finish right here. What people are going to do is try to interfere with your triangle. So as they do that, you let the hand come in, and you just lock on the far side of the hip, bottom of the foot pointed up. Now, line everything up. Armpit, elbow, elbow, shoulder, shoulder in a straight line, and then we get a pull for the finish. Anytime you're finishing Kimuras from bottom closed guard, try to put their hand inside your knee. Okay, so I take the grip, I line everything up, and I just slowly work his hand inside my knee. Before it ever gets there, I'll have the submission. Okay? So we had a rear triangle that we just practiced. Now we're adding a front triangle and a Kimura finish out of the front triangle. Part of the reason for this is not because I expect you to lose the triangle from the back and not submit them. It's to create this relationship in your mind where you had a Kimura, so you know you've got a triangle. And you know that because you've got a rear triangle, you also have a front triangle. All that changes is they get on top of you. And then you go back to, well, I've got a triangle, so that means I've got a Kimura. And so we finish with a Kimura here. And this helps build that association in your mind. If you've got a Kimura, you've got a triangle. If you've got a front triangle, you also have a rear triangle and an opposite triangle just by changing the alignment of your body. If you have a rear triangle like I just did, and they get on top of you, now you've got a front triangle. And anytime you've got a triangle, you've got a Kimura. And so we want to bring these together so that once you have sensitivity to one of these attacks, you know that something corresponds to it that you can also be on the lookout for. We're down on a kneeling position here. I've got the overhook. I start exposing the back of the head and I start to square up to it. Okay? What I need to do now is get my head, armpit, and elbow over that arm. Now she's keeping it in the air right now. Yeah, probably not. I might go for a different attack if the arm is like that. Sometimes people will have their elbow in this kind of position here. Sometimes it will be down, closer, further. What you want to do when you take this Kimura is try to avoid, let's say here. Try to avoid just going with the hand, okay? You want to get your head moving over your target first, so there's weight on the back of the head and you're not too exposed to the single when it's time for our transition here. Now when I transition, my goal is elbow to elbow, wrist deep. Not elbow to armpit, frame hand, okay? Not this, but this, okay? So my head goes over and I lace elbow to elbow, frame hand through. Now I can essentially invite her towards the single leg. I take my grip along the way, I lock up, and as she goes around, I just sit my right leg forward and I lock the T-Kimura position here. When she goes to get up on me, I practice returning her down to the mat, keeping my legs free, and building up my attack accordingly. Okay, there's a whole bunch of ways we can go. Arm locks, triangles, all those things that we like to use out of the Kimura. Allison has me in the half guard position here. Now, one of the reasons that you might go to Kimura instead of just passing this guard straight away is maybe they've done a good job coming from this hip check and going into a tight waist on you. So they go through and they come up. Now, keep in mind, you can attack either arm. My head, armpit, and elbow are above both of hers, so either one can be attacked, okay? When we practiced yesterday, we went with an overhook to start. I moved my head towards my partner's hip, so that I can start flattening her out and blocking out their elbow knee escape. Then we went all the way over and we locked up, similar to the palm down grip that we did from side control. Then we can lock everything in, everything's good to go. People will get to that. They're gonna know that the overhook, the movement of your head and the left arm together means Kimura is coming. This by itself is just me responding to an underhook. But when my hand starts reaching over the top, now she should be suspicious that a Kimura is coming, okay? So now we go in and we attack the prop arm instead. So all I'm gonna do is take this overhook, this right hand, and I'm gonna bring my elbow to my hip and just put my hand here on her hip, okay? I'm just trying to put a check on her hip so I know where it is. It's not really here to stop her moving at all. It's just so I know, all right, there's the hip. The reason I need to know that is I'm about to take my right leg and put my knee right over top of that. Now I go up to a standing position and I clear her head. So we're almost in the single leg position we just came from. I put my hand over her wrist, just keeping it on the floor. My head goes well forward and we put the frame arm in. Now I lock up and I sit down with control, turning towards my partner. Allison will probably start to come up at this point and I can use this Kimura. If it goes behind the back, we've got our submission. Probably Allison, you'll have your hand right here. Okay? We'll end up in this position. Now I'm going to use my right leg to take her up and over. We find ourselves perfect T-Kimura ready to attack. Now that last part I sort of just threw at you. I just take my right leg and throw her over. Because you have a Kimura grip, it's pretty easy to tilt somebody down and lift them with the corner reversal. All I've got to keep in mind is it's going to be my right leg against her right leg if I've got her right arm inside the Kimura. Okay? So if we've got a half guard position again, we're in, Allison goes in, she takes the tight waist grip. I can respond to that with my own Kimura on this arm, but people get suspicious of that, so we might go with a hand on the hip. Now I take my knee to my own hand, so I've got a blocker stopping her from forming an angling and continuing her attack. I come up off the floor, so now I can start to bring her head down and expose it. My head goes over the arm, we look for the hand, we look for the frame, and now I sit down with control here,
drawing the Kimura into position. Okay? You'll see Allison is naturally doing what she should to stay on top of me. My right knee goes out by her right leg. My knee higher than her hip. Her right arm inside the Kimura. So we've got right leg to right leg, right knee higher than right hip, right hand in the Kimura. That means everything goes up and over my right shoulder. You'll see that there's a circular movement involved. I pick her up in the air and I just know that we'll eventually go off to the right here. At this point, you know what to do. They try to come up on top of you. You can always return them to the ground, and then you're ready to go in and get your different finishes to work. Kimura it's one of the most powerful things you can learn in jiu-jitsu, regardless of what specific Kimura you learn. Like if you just learned the side Kimura, that's extremely powerful. And later on, you'll be able to learn all of the other things associated with Kimura. If you just learned the T-Kimura, but you didn't really feel comfortable finishing the lock, that would also be fine, because that opens the door for lots of other powerful attacks. But when I'm sparring now, anytime I'm across somebody's center line, so I'm in their half guard, I'm in side control, I'm going towards their back, anytime I'm across their body, there's a Kimura somewhere around them. And once I lock a Kimura, I'm either going to get to a winning position and then get a submission, or I'm going to get directly to the submission. Okay? So you could think of Kimura as, once you have the grip, the Kimura, the match is basically won. It's just a matter of what path will be traced on the map that leads you to that victory. It might be very direct, hand behind the back and finish. It might be a Kimura grip in the half guard, a forward roll, T-Kimura. They get up, you take their back, and you finish on their back. Okay? But the Kimura is something where whatever was going on, you now have a Kimura, you are now in the driver's seat to the finish line of victory. Okay? That's how I want you to see this. Expect to land in a T-Kimura before you land in a submission. This is the thing that you have to trade off with. You're not going to get straight into the submission. You're going to go from your scramble, whether you created it by rolling, they created it by doing some sort of takedown exchange, whatever it is, you're going to get a T-Kimura, you're going to get a Kimura. You'll have to almost always go through the T-Kimura position that we're studying, then it resolves in your favor. On the back, triangle, with a side Kimura, something like this. Okay? So the way that you could summarize all that or visualize it is we have this really wide funnel, and there's all the potential things that can happen between you and the other person. You're gripping on them, they're gripping on you. One of you's passing guard, one of you's playing guard. You're wrestling each other. Just think of all the scenarios you run into. And then you get a Kimura grip. That funnel gets really narrow. Depending on where you came from to get that Kimura grip, you probably go to the next part of the funnel, which is T-Kimura. Almost always. Okay? Then a Kimura finish, back take, something like this. Okay? But from almost any start, you can get a Kimura grip. If you do that, you'll probably have to go through a T-Kimura. Once you go through T-Kimura, you are in the driver's seat on your way to submissions, or at least lots of points.